I just thought it was time that we start looking out for the taxpayers' interest. And I think that's where I come in, making sure that I am doing everything that I possibly can to keep this state as affordable as we possibly can. I am here on probably not so great news for the taxpayers of the city of Fort Pierce. I'm often referred to sometimes, that's sort of an oxymoron, as the Jim Cantori of wasteful spending. When I show up, it's usually not great news. So I am here today to reveal what I think is excessive and wasteful spending of the city of Fort Pierce, and I think we're going to show you not only is tax reform here in the city, but it is very much doable, and it is about time that we offer some relief to the residents. So since entering this office as your CFO, I have been on this mission trying to contextualize and put a number on just how much government has grown over the last 5 or 6 years, ever since COVID. We all know that government has grown. We can see it in our bills. We can see it as we go around our communities, but no one has ever put an actual number to it, and that's where we are coming in. There is a methodology that we use in order to do this. We're going to walk through the methodology, and hopefully you will agree with me that it's about time for property tax reform and put more of this money back in the pockets, the wallets, and the purses of the taxpayers who pay it, and not in the hands of government and government bureaucrats. So we have been doing this exercise across the state. We have done 13 of these reviews, or audits, if you will, FAFO audits, which stand for the Florida Agency for Fiscal Accountability. It's not what you think it stands for, so stop. But over those 13 local governments, we have identified $1.97 billion with a B in excessive and wasteful spending across those jurisdictions. Now, this is not a cumulative total. This is a total of just last year alone. This shows that government has grown way too fast, way too quickly, and put too much strain on the taxpayers who are supporting the government. Just some numbers, and there will be there is a method to our madness and why we are here today. So as we start going through these, we stop off at different locations, and we go to these different locations, these different counties, for different reasons. So we went to the city of Jacksonville. Jacksonville consolidated government with Duval County. It's one of the largest cities. And we found $199 million of excessive and wasteful spending in that county. We went to Jacksonville because it was a large city. We also went to Broward County. Broward County is a deep blue city, and we went there to show what was happening in that deep blue city. But we also go to deep red counties. We went to Manatee County, which is deep red, and we found at that point, which was one of the worst offenders in the terms of the highest percentage overinflation in the population, and they had wasted $112 million of taxpayer money last year alone. We also reviewed Miami-Dade County. Miami-Dade County, we have found $302 million worth of wasteful and excessive spending just last year alone. I tried so hard to find another $3 million so I could say Miami-Dade 305, but I could not get it. I tried. But the reason why we went to Miami-Dade is because we wanted to show the growth and the size of government. Over the last 5 years, I want to say that they had added 3,500 new employees to government, and their budget went up almost $900 million over that time, showing how large that government has grown. Nassau County is a county where we had an explosion of people moving there, very rapid growth, and we were showing that that rapid growth does not necessarily mean that government needs to grow as fast as population. And we found $53 million worth of excessive and wasteful spending. St. Petersburg, we stopped off in St. Petersburg, Florida. Why? Because we know that they have a bunch of infrastructure problems in St. Pete. They have sewers and wastewater projects that have been neglected for decades and decades. In fact, it's so bad in St. Pete that when it rains, they have to discharge a lot of the wastewater into the bay to relieve the stuff. Now, they upgrade. But so on the, they are talking about putting a taxing question on the ballot in this November to ask the voters to appropriate more money to them so they can get more money so they can fix the infrastructure. Until you find out that last year they wasted $50 million of taxpayer money, and they had the money, they just chose it, they chose to waste it on bureaucrats. So all of that is happening, and then probably the worst offender of all in terms of dollars, the Palm Beach County, who had a total of $344 million of wasteful and excessive spending. Before we start with the numbers on the city of Fort Pierce, I do want to recognize some people who were in the room. Sheriff Del Toro, Sheriff is in the back. Sheriff, thank you for everything that you do. Appreciate you. And even though she is not here, I'm supposed to say that even though she is in Tallahassee fighting for the taxpayers, Representative Trabulsi is my favorite representative of all. Hi, Rep. Thank you for everything you do. So now, across those 13 governments, there was $1.97 billion. Let's just call it $2 billion to be even. $2 billion worth of excessive and wasteful spending. That is money that could have been easily cut from their budgets and returned to the taxpayers. And the reason why we are here today is because the number that could be returned to the taxpayers in this city is probably the highest that we have seen. So again, a method to a madness. We just don't pick these willy-nilly. We pick them for a reason because we want to make the case and lay the case for property tax reform. Now, I want to be clear on those cuts to the budgets. That is the cut to budgets where we believe it will not harm services whatsoever. So if you have a local government saying that you're going to have longer 911 wait times, if you go and call your sheriff is not going to be able to have people dispatched, or if you call EMS or fire, they're not going to come as quickly. That is absolutely BS. It is scare tactics, and all they are trying to do is get you to vote no on the property tax reform so they can keep their big bloated budgets. Do not fall for it. It is not true. It is not accurate. In fact, government has grown so much over the last 5 years, I think they can still cut all of the waste, keep the amount of money for fire and police, keep on adding fire and police, because as populations grow, so should fire and police. What shouldn't grow is the bureaucracy underneath you, okay? Because we have known, history have shown that the larger government grows, the more intrusive they become, the harder it is to work, and the worse it makes you for your friends, your family, and especially if you are a business. So please do not fall for the scare tactics. In fact, you know, it's a little bit nefarious. So everyone here, I'm assuming, pays some sort of property tax or through other areas. What you probably don't know is that a portion of your property taxes are going to fund organizations that are actively lobbying against you, the taxpayers. So you're out there trying to keep your head above water in a time where you have rising costs, and a portion of your property taxes are going out there creating a PR campaign to tell you that they need to keep your property taxes high. It's a little nefarious, and I think it's something that we should think about going forward. So a couple of things is that they are going to try, local governments, I'm going to tell you, we've been doing this exercise now for the better part of 5 months, and every time we do it, we predict what local government is going to say. They're going to say that our numbers are inaccurate. They're going to say that they're going to have Sunday editorial writers write pen op-eds in the Sunday paper saying that they can't cut anything. It's going to be impossible for to cut. And all of this is just meant to distract you from the fact that they are taking your money. But the biggest thing that they're going to do is they're going to try to refute our methodology. okay? The methodology that we coming up with these numbers. I want to point to this board right here and what it says on this board, because this board, and the quote, validates what we are doing. At the James Madison Institute, which is a fiscally conservative think tank organization, we believe that the FAFO methodology, specifically they're talking about the FAFO methodology, similar to what has been enacted in law in states like Colorado and Utah, is one of the most effective tools to demonstrate the need for tax relief for Floridians and to rein in local government spending. So as much as a bureaucrat wants to say that we just made this methodology up, we just picked these numbers out of the air, no. By a show of hands here, how many have heard of the state of Colorado? How many have heard of the state of Utah? Right? Colorado in 1993 voted into their constitution a taxpayer bill of rights. And basically, among other things, it says that if government grows and if you collect taxes and fees over and above what is allowable for inflation and population growth, guess what? You should be giving it back to the taxpayers because government grew too quickly. Now, you could say a lot of things about Colorado and how they've been governed here over the last 10 years, but generally, they are considered one of the gold standards of fiscal responsibility because of what they have enshrined in their constitution. So what we did is we took that same methodology and we applied it to local governments to put a number on just how large local governments have grown over the last 5 or 6 years relative to inflation and population growth. Now, mind you, keep that in mind, inflation and population growth, because this is key. This is how we did it. We started off with the 2019-2020 fiscal year budgets, because these budgets run mid-years, right? So we started off with the 2019-2020, and then we, by using basic math, increased the budget every year organically by inflation and population for 5 years to find out where the budget would have reasonably been if it wasn't for a rise in property values and a corresponding rise in property taxes. So we came up where the budget should have been and then compared it to what it actually is. And this number over here is the number that we believe is excessive and wasteful spending, money that they took because they had the opportunity to take, never thought about giving it back to you, the taxpayers. All they thought about was doing was expanding local government. Now, when we think about inflation and population, we're thinking about increased costs, right? The increased cost of things, we accounted for that. When we're talking about population, we're talking about the need for new first responders, fire, police, EMS. Because those are really the only things that should go up as population goes up. You can make the argument that government costs, all other parts of government, should go down cost per capita. But the more population you have, the more first responders, because the first rule of government is to protect its citizens. And you do that by funding fire and police first. So in that calculation, it is included money for fire, police. What's included in that number is raises for our first responders. And what is included in that is the increased costs. We've accounted for everything that a local government should or would need in order to deliver services to the taxpayers. What should scare you is that Fort Pierce blew right past that number. We have crunched those numbers. Now, I will tell you, I'm going to put this all in context for you, that Fort Pierce is a small city, relatively small city. You're talking about 50,000 people, right, roughly, and a budget of around 68 million people. So these numbers are going to be smaller. They are not going to be the eye-popping numbers that you see in Palm Beach County, 344 million. They're not going to be the eye-popping number of 278 million that you see in Hillsborough County. They're not going to be the eye-popping number of 302 million that you see in Miami-Dade. But what you're going to see is that they've excessively spent about $10.5 million of your money. Now, for a budget that's excessive and wasteful, we think this is the that should have never, that they can actually safely cut their budget, still take care of fire and police, and still offer property tax reform. That $10 million is a pretty large percentage of a budget that started $42 million about 5-6 years ago. That's a big deal, and I'm going to show you how big of a deal it is when we tell you how much that we think that they can cut their budget and still offer property tax relief. So what does that mean? That means since 2019, the Fort Pierce general fund budget, all we are caring about for this exercise is general fund budget, not total budget. We don't, for this purposes, it's property taxes. Capital improvement budget, your total budget, are buildings and stuff. That is not part of this. So just the general fund budget, the portion that is funded by property taxes, went up $25 million, almost 60% over the last 6 years. That's a pretty large increase for a small city such as this. So that is a pretty big increase. Now, I'm going to put this in more context for you also. That number of 25 million, that 59% increase for your general fund, only accommodated about 4,500 people moving to the city. 25 million for 4,500 extra people. I see a lot of shaking heads. I see a lot of mouths agape. This is not unlike what's going on everywhere in the state of Florida. Local governments are taking extra property tax revenue partially because people are moving to the state of Florida and filling their coffers. And a lot of it, unfortunately, is not going to fire and police. It's not going to public safety. It's going to the bureaucracy underneath them. And I want to make this point also, is that one of the tricks you're going to hear local governments say, well, show me the line item. Show me exactly the line item, the number and the dollar amount of what you disagree with in your budget. You know what I disagree with? The whole budget. It's in itself, because the growth is in the personnel costs. I feel bad for some of the, I truly, look, as a staunch fiscal conservative as I am, and I want to keep government small and accountable and cost less, I feel bad for some of these employees that just been hired by these governments across the state of Florida over the last 5 to 6 years. Because they're going to be in fear of probably their jobs. They probably should have never been hired in the first place, unless they were transitioning people out in retirement. But I actually do feel bad for them, because they were hired under the premise that they were probably going to be there for a while, because government jobs these days are pretty good jobs, and now they may not be there. So whose mistake is that? It's the people who hired them in the first place. Should have never hired them in the first place, should have never let government grow to the position that it's grown right now. So what does this mean? We're going to put that number into context, the 25 million into 4,500. That means person moving in, the budget went up around $5,500. For city, the budget went up $22,000. How does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. In the private sector, when you have work, the private sector becomes more productive. They do more. Most of the time, you will have employees in a private sector sit there and say, I'm doing more. I'm going to prove to my boss that I'm going to do more. I'm going to prove to my boss that I'm going to do so much more that they don't need to hire anybody else, and I'm going to ask for a raise because I'm worth more. Not government. They basically see a couple extra papers on their desks, and then they start putting out applications. They ask for applications for extra people. Government works the opposite of way the private sector works. So this is a concerning number, and it should concern everyone here. Is that how many people did they hire for those extra 45 people? 4,500 people, 90. 90 new full-time equivalent people, employees, just to accommodate for an increase of 4,500 people. When we talk about the increase of government and the bureaucracy that is growing underneath you as taxpayers, this is about. What makes it worse is this, is that of those 90, only 15 were first responders. Ask yourself the question, is government protecting you, or is government protecting their large, bloated budgets? Ask yourself that question when you read the paper in a couple of days and you start seeing elected officials or government bureaucrats be quoted in your paper or go on TV, because I promise you they're going to go on TV. They're going to be, the reporters are going to ask questions today, and then they're going to run to the elected officials and they're going to want sound bites. And it's going to be, CFO Ingoglia claims that we've excessively and wastefully spent over $10 million last year alone. Remember, that $10 million is last year. That's not cumulative. That is just 1 year, last year, right? And then they're going to say, well, he doesn't know how budgeting works. No, we know how budgeting works. I have been looking at local government budgets and federal government budgets for the better part of 25 years. I've been doing this for a very long time. The problem for local governments is I know where they hide the money. They know that I know the accounting tricks on how they get away with this stuff. And I'm here calling BS because every 20 years we seem to go through the same thing. We had the same thing happen in the mid-2000s. We had a rise in property values, a corresponding rise in property taxes, and then what happened? Everyone got angry, and we wanted property tax relief. And the property tax relief came in an additional homestead exemption. I'm going to explain to you what we have and what we had, and you are going to understand the problem. When the original homestead exemption went on the ballot years ago, when it was voted into our Constitution, the original homestead exemption was $25,000. At that time, the average home in the state of Florida was $75,000. That means the original homestead exemption exempted about a third of your home from property taxation. So what happened in I think it was 2012, we voted on a constitutional amendment that gave us the current structure that we have right now. And the current structure works like this. The first $25,000, which is exemption, exempts the first $25,000 of value. The next $25,000 is taxed. The next $25,000 over that, there's another exemption, but there's an exemption. You're exempting school boards from taxation when they're some of the most wasteful spenders in government. I have no idea. But when you blend it all together, it only offers on average between $39,000 to $40,000 worth of homestead exemption. The reason why property taxes right now are so problematic is that only is about 9% of your home. It used to be 33, and now it's 9. And this is why going back in and fixing the property tax system and reforming it for good is what we need to do. So we have crunched the numbers. And this is why we are here today. Again, biggest city, highest percentage, red cities, blue cities, cities that need infrastructure that they wasted money on. The reason why we're here today is because this is some of the highest numbers that we've seen in what they can offer in property tax reform. If you got rid of the $10 million worth of excessive and wasteful spending, if you cut that out, still funded your fire, your police, and all your essential services, and you gave that money back to the taxpayers without harming services, you can cut the millage rate 1.93 mils, which is the highest that we've seen in the state of Florida so far. That is a lot. In fact, when we saw this number, now, granted, the city has a higher percentage of revenue coming in from property taxes, so there's going to be a higher percentage of a cut that's assigned to it. But this is so high that when we ran the number, I actually had to go back and verify the number 2 or 3 times just to make sure it was right. So what does this mean for everyday people here in the city? That means that if you have a home that is assessed for $400,000, the city could easily cut your property taxes by $772 a year. That's just the general fund portion of your budget. If schools ever right-sized and got rid of their waste, you'd save a lot more money on top of it. That's for $400,000. If you had $500,000, you'd be able to save $965 a year. Again, a large number. If You had a property that was assessed at $600,000, you'd be saving a whopping $1,158 a year. This is real money. You might want to get that. I heard it's government, and they're really trying to stop this press conference right now. This is real money that belongs in the hands of the taxpayers, not in the hands of government. Local governments are going to try to tell you that they need to keep it. It's totally untrue. Why do we know it's untrue? Because our methodology and how we do this has been validated by James Madison Institute. In fact, they are partners with this, along with other organizations. They come out and they explain that this is the right way to contextualize and put how large government has grown. There is our methodology right there. It is the base budget plus inflation plus population equals the acceptable budget growth. It doesn't have to be exact, but it gives you an idea of where the budget should reasonably be. And then we subtract it from what the actual budget was. And the difference is excessive and wasteful spending. This is the difference that belongs in the hands of the taxpayers. This is money that local governments would have never had in the first place if it wasn't for the rise in property values and the windfalls that they got coming into their coffers. And this is the frustrating part. This is the thing that aggravates me as a taxpayer and as somebody who is looking out for the taxpayers of inside every government across this great state, is that every government took this extra money and spent it. They never thought of giving it back to the taxpayers. Now, local government officials and the politicians running for office are going to say, yeah, but we just cut your millage rate. Cutting your millage rate, if you have an increase, a sharp increase in your property values, still yields a property net tax increase. It's a game that they play. We need to stop falling for these games. If your tax bill went from $3,500 to $6,500 and they cut the millage rate, did your taxes get raised, yes or no? Of course it did. There's a game that they play. They love doing this. Don't fall the games. Here's a visual representation in terms of the chart of how Fort Pierce's budget increased over the last 5 or 6 years. So in conclusion, we are here today because we are shining light on more excessive local government spending, keeping your taxes higher than it should be, and yet complaining when people want property tax relief. The people in this room have the power to make the change. It is unfortunate, but local elected officials had the opportunity to reduce your property taxes or keep your property taxes at least where they were, 2019, 2021 levels, and they chose not to. They chose to take the extra money and expand government. They had, since 2019, they had not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 opportunities to get it done. And still your taxes went high. But the best part about this is that there will be a constitutional amendment on the ballot in November 26. What that amendment will be has yet to be seen because the legislature, that both the House and the Senate, have to figure it out. Is it going to get done in regular session? I don't know. Is it going to get done in special session? I don't know. But what I do know is that it would be political malpractice not to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot on November 26 because people are hurting. Candidates and elected officials cannot run for office, either election or re-election, running on a platform of bringing more affordable housing to the state of Florida and yet at the same time increase the cost of housing. That doesn't make them good stewards, it makes them hypocrites. We need to realize that. But the best part about all this is that every person in this room and every person listening to me on the live stream and eventually on the news, you all have the opportunity to do this for yourselves. Don't listen to the noise of local government saying they need this excess. Listen to your own economics in your own house. Look at your property tax bills and vote for property tax relief in November when we see it. At this time, I'd like to call my good friend David Santiago to come up and address.
Thank you, Chief. I'm sitting here smiling because my name is David Santiago, as the Chief said. I have a few hats. You know, I'm the Strategic Director for Libre Institute, which is a sister organization for Americans for Prosperity here in the state of Florida. And I get the privilege to join our Chief often across the state and talking about these very important things. I also currently serve as a county council member just a little bit north of here, about a couple hours in Volusia County. I have previous experience also in serving in the legislature for 8 years. And prior to that, I served as a city commissioner in the city of Deltona, where I live. But I share that because, you know, Chief, this has been happening for years, and I'm very grateful of your leadership and what you're doing. But 20 years ago, when I was a city commissioner, this type of behavior was still going. It happened before that. We had the opportunity at one time in the city of Deltona, and we had several million dollars left over in our budget because we canceled some improvement projects that we were never going to pursue. At that time, I didn't know I was being innovative, but I said, well, if we have this extra money, let's give it back to the taxpayers. Sort of like you said, Chief. I was criticized, attacked for even the idea or the concept of giving taxpayers money back that is yours. So it began years ago. In the legislature, I got the opportunity to see firsthand from that side of it, but even on the county side. So now serving in the county, I'd like to take credit, Chief, for this tax reform or this elimination of property taxes, but I won't. But I'll share this story. About a year and a half ago, I made a motion in our county council, and I said I wanted support to send a resolution to the governor and to the cabinet and the legislature asking them to look into ways to eliminate property taxes. Because it's a broken system. It needs to be either revamped or eliminated. I think it can be eliminated. And we sent that letter about 2 weeks before the governor made his public announcement.
Never saw it.
I got called from the media asking me, well, did you talk to the governor about this? And I was this close to taking credit for it, but I didn't. But I was delighted that our leadership in Tallahassee, our chief, our governor was already on it. They were seeing it. So I support that initiative. We voted unanimously out of Volusia County, our county council, to eliminate property taxes. I think we're the only one, Chief, that have done that in the entire state of Florida. We believe that it can be done. It's going to be a difficult road, but we are supportive of it as a county council. And again, Chief, I want to thank you because we have a CFO that has the courage to do this. It's easy to sit in Tallahassee, right, and have people come visit you. He's taking his time and doing the hard work and making enemies along the way, but he can do it. I like to describe our chief as, if you're going to war, that's the guy you want in the foxhole with you. So thank you, Chief. Keep up the good work, and I'm here to support you 100%.
Thank you. You know, David Santiago brought up a very good point, and the point was I'm making a lot of enemies along the way. But for every enemy that I make, I'm making hundreds of friends, taxpayers. So some of the most rewarding things about my job is when I'm out in public, and a lot of times I might be at a Publix, true story. I was at a Publix, must have been about 3 weeks ago, and the young lady checking me out, not checking me out, my wife, I didn't mean that. My wife's probably like, checking you out. I'm at the checkout, and the young lady is ringing up my groceries. And as she handed me the bag, she said, I just want to thank you for everything that you're doing. It's actually making a difference. I was at a sporting event a couple of weeks ago, come out of an elevator, and the person walking into the elevator went, it's you. And I said, it's you. I'm like, I had no idea what he was talking about. He was like, thank you so much. I was on a flight, commercial flight. I was sitting in the very first seat on the aisle, and an older lady was boarding the plane. She had to be in her 80s. She passed by me. She kneeled down, put her hand on my knee, and said, thank you, God bless you for everything you're doing. That's what makes it worth it. So yes, I do know a lot of enemies, but I'd say it's the right enemies. I will taxpayers every day of the week and twice on Sunday. But I will tell you, I'd be remiss in saying this also, is that some of my allies in this fight are actually elected officials, because they know sometimes they do not have the votes or the ability to push and give money back to the taxpayers. So I'm giving them some sort of air cover with that. I'm giving them the ability to go in there and say, have you heard what the CFO is doing? Have you seen how much money that we are wasting? Let's give the money back. I cannot tell you, Republican and Democrat, elected officials, thank me for doing this. So I'm making the right enemies with that. But the best part is that we are making a difference. There have been a bunch of stories where and some of these are well documented. I mean, heck, take like Miami-Dade, Mayor Cava. I believe it was on a Monday afternoon, she made an announcement that they had a $400 million deficit that they had to make up in Miami-Dade. On Tuesday, we sent her a letter saying that you are next up for a DOGE audit. On Thursday, they found $400 million. Isn't that amazing? So with that, I appreciate you guys. I am going to continue to be an advocate for the taxpayers. I'm going to continue working hard in this role. I'm going to be in this role for the better part of another 8 years. I'm not going away. If any local government thinks that this is over, it is not over. This is going to continue even after we get property tax reform, because we will get property tax reform, because the only way that you keep government small, accountable, and cost less is if you make sure you hold them accountable and somebody starts calling them out, and I will continue to do that. Any questions from the press? I see you sort of formulating a question. This is easy. I shot all the birds out of that tree, didn't I? We're good. I appreciate you guys. If anybody on the press needs any clarification, please get with Sydney Booker. She is in the back. We'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Guys, God bless you. God bless the great state of Florida. Thank you.